واشهد أن نبينا وعظيمنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحبيبه اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. يقول جل جلاله في محكم التنزيل: إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم وإذا أراد الله بقوم سوءا فلا مرد له وما لهم من دونه من وال. Brothers and sisters, this ayah is probably one of the most overused verses in the entirety of the Quran. It is used so often that to a certain degree people don't even fully understand what it means or how it's supposed to be utilized. But today, I want to share with you a few ideas or a few thoughts that came from the London Muslim survey that was run earlier this year. I know Ramadan is coming up soon, but you have 2 more weeks for Ramadan. Inshallah, the local imam will talk about Ramadan next week and the week after. In 2018, almost to the date, almost exactly during this period, I ran a survey from this masjid here. And people filled it out manually with the pens and papers. And we had over 960 responses, and Shabab ran around putting it together. Now, we didn't really do it very well, so the data was very difficult to actually benefit from. It was hard to crunch the numbers because people didn't follow the instructions, and I wasn't very good at explaining those instructions, and the actual form itself was not amazing. But it was something that we tried. And from that data, or what we were able to take from it, I shared with you things regarding it within the months that followed in early 2018. And we talked about having a survey team or having some form of a census in the city for years after that. And nothing really occurred until recently, where we have the Al-Arqam Social Innovation Lab that started earlier in 2023. And they put together a survey that was able to reach out to 680 families across the city. Now, granted, the majority of those families were concentrated in the northern western part of London, where my center is. But we were able to get responses from all over the city. Not enough to represent the whole city, but enough to give us an idea of where we need to move, which direction we have to move in, inshallah ta'ala, to continue to do this work. What I want to share with you are a few thoughts that are taken from the data from this survey. I mean, what exactly were we able to benefit from or learn about our community? And I think it's very important for us to talk about that today, within this period that we're living in, as we continue to watch the blood of our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land being spilled on an hourly basis. As I speak to you today, as I speak to you now, by the time this khutbah is over, more children and more women and more elderly will be buried under the rubble of their own homes. Or they will be pulled out from under the rubble only to be wrapped up in white cloth and mourned by their loved ones. And I've never seen anything like this throughout my life. Usually, within the struggle of power within this world, and this is as old as the human story has been old. The courtiers always struggle for power, but they have to put on a show of ethicality and morality. They have to. You can't bluntly come out and say, I hate this group of people and I think they should die. If you do that, you don't get power anymore because it doesn't look good, because it does not fit within the morality of the human race. So courtiers have always been good at least concealing their intentions and following a general rule. If you broke the rule, well, too bad, sorry for you, you have to now deal with the consequences, even though they all maybe have wanted someone to break that rule for them. But today what I'm seeing happening in the Holy Land is just a complete neglect, is complete ignoring of the basic rules that everyone has agreed to play by. Which is, if you can't just go and break international law. You can't bomb hospitals. You can't raid refugee camps. You can't force people into a small area and then bomb the area where the civilians are living. You can't do that. And if you do it, you have to do it in a way where no one's watching or no one's hearing, or you have a good way to defend it. But what's happening right now, that doesn't exist. They're just bombing it openly in real time. In real time, you get to watch the bombs fall upon civilian neighborhoods and children be pulled out of the rubble in real time, and no one cares. And the vetoes used to, when they did the veto, they used to at least give an explanation. Now they don't. They just say veto. That's it. They have nothing to add. This is going to happen. You like it, it's going to happen. You don't like it, it's going to happen. That scares me. It really does scare me, because that's a change of how the struggle of power in the world has always worked. The struggle of power in the world has always been concealed, at least concealed with good ethics, even though we know deep inside it's not there, but it's at least the show is on, so you can hold people to some standard. But now that's gone. It's not even there. Yes, there are Muslims, there are you, and we're going to slaughter them, and that's that. And that's that. And if you don't like it, well, you go do your protest or whatever. It's not going to change. That's going to happen. That's just very new to me. Every other struggle we've seen historically, there was always an explanation of why it happened. There was always some accountability to when they crossed the line, like it happened in Abu Ghraib in Iraq years ago. When they crossed the line, there was some accountability that happened. We know it's all for show, but at least something happened. At least they wouldn't defend something like that. Even when they went into a country where there was nothing, there was some explanation of why they went in. They had to at least explain themselves. They had to live up to the standard that the world expects everyone to live up to. But now they're not. Which puts us in a very peculiar situation as Muslims. In terms of, well then, that's not the case. Then if it's a struggle of power, then we have to start working harder. Because we thought at some point the truth would prevail. At least the naive amongst us did. That the truth will be revealed and everyone would just follow that. Well, that's not the case. So then how do we deal with this? Because you can only put up with so much of this imagery before you start losing feeling or losing interest. It's very difficult to continue to see these pictures. These people that are struggling, they're not like us. No, they are us. They are you and myself. Same names, same texture, same belief, same everything. And this is how they're being treated. There's a very small interest, a very little interest in the sanctity of their lives, in their well-being, in their future. So what did the survey tell us? The survey gave us a certain piece of information I'm going to share with you. The survey showed that we were an extremely high potential society. We are generally well-educated, we're generally well-skilled, we generally have big families, and we're mostly wealthy. Like we have good wealth, we're in the majority of it. However, the gap between the poor, the rich and the poor in our community is huge. There's a huge gap between those who have and those who do not have. Those who are well-connected and those who are not well-connected. People who come here as refugees, their savings run out in 3 years. At the 3-year mark, you start seeing them struggle. You start seeing them struggle in terms of their masjid attendance, in terms of their housing, in terms of their Islamic identity, in terms of their mental health. It's all there. After the 3rd year, when their savings run out, they can't manage anymore. Because we have a gap between our society, those who are well established and those who aren't. But the potential in our community is huge because we have all of the tools. The tools are there. If you want to see change, it's there. It's just we have to figure out how to bridge that gap. There's a lot of social isolation in our community. The survey showed a lot of social isolation. People feel alone. They want help with marriage. They want help with with parenting their kids. They want help with finding jobs, but they feel alone. They don't know who to turn to. They don't feel comfortable or safe coming to masajid and asking for help. They feel that they're turned down too often. They feel that they're turned away from people when they ask for help too many times. So they don't feel like they're a part. The sense of belonging is weak in our community. It's weak. People come attend Jumu'ah, but that doesn't mean that they feel that they're a part of this community, that they're responsible, that they have ownership on this society, that they will be held accountable Yawm al-Qiyamah by God Himself regarding what they did for the society that they lived amongst. They don't feel that because there's that lack of sense of belonging. There's a mental health problem. Parents and their children struggle with mental health problems, and they don't know how to approach it. And the taboo surrounding it still causes them to believe certain things, that they are somehow, they're under some spell, or there's a jinn inside them, or some other belief that doesn't have any, and they lack and they're deprived access to proper treatment. And it's not noticed early enough for us to actually take care of them, and they struggle for years, and they end up losing functionality when they could have easily been functional human beings. It shows that we're not very good at coming up with innovative social solutions to our problems. It shows that we're able to identify the problems very clearly, yet we have very few practical solutions to any of these problems aside from complaining about them. The survey showed that we know what's wrong. We know what's missing us, but we don't have any idea of how to change it. And we have no attempts, we have no system put in place by anyone to actually try and come up with solutions. There is a general discouragement of doing such a thing. because we tend immediately to turn it into some form of disagreement. That's to a certain degree what the survey showed. Jazakumullah khair, the brothers and sisters who spent hours upon hours upon hours putting it together. 680 families responded, families, not individuals. And this is what kind of the gist of it. You can ask your imam to actually bring up the PowerPoint and you can look at the actual data if you want to see it and want to deal with it. What I take from it, and this is what I take from it, is that the potential for change for our ummah, not just our community here in little old London, Ontario, for our ummah is there. We can change. We can. And I'm using that terminology very, very specifically. We can. I'm not saying change will happen. I'm not saying it is happening. No, I don't have that knowledge. I don't sell illusions to people. I'm not trying to sell you some disbelief that, oh, it's going to happen. Everything is getting better. I don't have that information. I don't have any way to solidify or verify any of that. What I can tell you that is factual is that we can change. Like, we have the tools. The tools for change are there. We're not missing any of them. Nothing is missing. If we want to change, it is possible. Sometimes, historically, people have wanted to change, but they lacked the tools, so they didn't. They lacked the tools. They couldn't do it. They either lacked wealth, they either lacked knowledge, they either lacked leadership, or they lacked the idea, the guidance, the way of life that would allow them to achieve that. They lacked something, so they couldn't make the change, even though deep inside they wanted to. They vocalized it. But for us as a community, what is clear is that we don't lack any of the essential or additional tools for change, for improvement. We have them all. What's missing is something a little bit different. What's missing is individuals feeling their responsibility towards their nation, towards the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The feeling that they are responsible for that. The feeling that they are valuable and that they have the ability to be the spark of change in the world. Yes, as some small individuals, one person living in a city that if you tell someone that you live in, they'll think you're living in a different country, in a different continent altogether, and you have to actually prove that this city exists in this country. Yes, in that city where you only have 36,000 Muslims. Yes, one person amongst us is capable of sparking true change. But that belief has to be there within the heart of that individual. And this is something that we know is truthful historically. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, when He talks about that, you've heard the verses in Surah Al-Anfal. إِن يَكُم مِّنكُمْ 20 صَابِرُونَ يَغْلِبُوا 200 وَإِن يَكُم مِّنكُمْ 100 يغلب ألفا من الذين كفروا بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون الآن خفف الله عنكم وعلم أن فيكم ضعفا فإن يكن منكم 100 صابرة يغلبوا 200 وإن يكن منكم 1000 يغلبوا 2000 بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. He talked about subhanahu wa ta'ala that the weight of a Muslim initially was 1 to 10. One man was worth 10 men in terms of the effect and impact that person had. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and now I see that there's weakness amongst you. There is weakness, so now it's 1 to 2. You've lost. That never happened historically. Muslims never actually went to 1 to 2, ever. It was talked about in the Quran as the consequence of weakness. But the Muslims actually in the initial ages never went through that. All throughout his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, never once did they actually fight an enemy where it was 1 to 2. And the only time they did in Hunayn, they almost lost it. Everything else was 1 to 8 and 1 to 10 and 1 to way beyond that. And they still were successful. This verse was there to say, look, if you change, the equation changes. If you change, the equation changes. But I won't change it unless you do. That's what إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِم means. If you continue to live the way I taught you, if you continue to follow the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then I will keep it for you. And if you fail to do that, then the equation will change for you. It was up to you. عليه الصلاة والسلام في حديث ابن عمر عند البخاري ومسلم, this is what he said. إِنَّمَا النَّاسُ كَالْإِبْلِ الْمِئَةِ لَا تَكَادُ تَجِدُ فِيهَا رَاحِلَةً. People are generally like 100 camels. You can barely find one rahila amongst them. One dependable, reliable one amongst them. That's what he's saying, alayhi salatu wasalam, that most people just don't care. They just don't care. For whatever reason, they don't have time, they're not interested. You can barely find amongst 100 one person who is reliable and dependable. The Quran says that, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَقَلِيلٌ مَّا هُمْ وَقَلِيلٌ مَّا هُمْ. They're few. Now, here's my question for you. What are you? Are you amongst that few? Or are you not? Are you amongst that few or are you not? I'm telling you right now, if you're sitting in this masjid, you already are. The majority of the Muslim ummah don't come to Jumu'ah. The majority of our ummah don't practice Islam to begin with. If you think this is the ummah, then you have a very eluded understanding of it. Our ummah is way bigger than this, even in the city. If all of the Muslims in this city, all the male Muslims decided to pray Jumu'ah, we would need 4 additional masajid bigger than this one. We would need 4 additional masajid twice the size of this one to actually bring them in. The majority of us don't come to Salat Jumu'ah to begin with. Maybe a third of them come for Eid, maybe. And the best statistic that I was able to come up with, maybe a third come for Eid. So if you're here, you're already amongst that small group. And if that smaller group, that qaleel group doesn't have the intention, doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the willpower to change, then yeah, we're going to keep on having these khutbahs. And you're going to keep on watching TV and seeing. Think about it. Think about all the Muslim countries over the last couple of decades. I'm in my late 30s at this point. Kosovo, and Kashmir, in Myanmar, in China, in parts of Pakistan and India, obviously, and Egypt and Libya. I'm just telling you off the top of my head the places that went through horrible atrocities. And Yemen, and Somalia, and Sudan, and Tunisia, and Algeria. That's not to talk about the Iraq, or Lebanon, or where I come from, which doesn't exist anymore, Syria, or the ongoing atrocity in Palestine. And there's probably more countries that I missed because there's too many of them. When you think about it, is this something you want to continue to happen in the world? Are you happy with that? Or do you think that that should change? And if you think that that should change, then where should the change start? I'm not talking about the bigger picture that I don't have the ability to control, nor do you. And if you and I sit down and we argue about the bigger picture change, then we'll waste time because neither of us actually have a say in that and we don't have a seat at the table. But where does it start? Where does it start? It starts with the individual. It starts with the person. It starts with a small change of intention inside your heart that no one can see. It can start today. It can be something that's happening right now as I speak that will later on lead to so much khair that my brain would not be able to comprehend and understand. Or things stay exactly the way they are. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه يغفر لكم يا فوز المستغفرين استغفر الله. الحمد لله وحده وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبع نهجه ووفى عهده. إخواني وأخواتي، الحديث اليوم حديث مكرر كوقوف المكرر، كهذه الخطب المكررة نعيد الكلام نفسه ونسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يضفي علينا من رحمته ومن حبه لدينه ومن امتثالنا لأمره ما يغير من واقعنا المر الذي نعيشه مما يشهده الإنسان على شاشات التلفاز وشاشات التواصل الاجتماعي بشكل يومي على مدار أكثر من 130 يوما، ونحن نشاهد القتل الممنهج ونشاهد هذا الدمار المتعمد ونشاهد سفك الدماء الطاهرة، دماء الأطفال ودماء النساء ودماء المرضى، ونشاهد غزو المشافي ونشاهد تدمير المدارس والمخيمات والكرة الأرضية بأكملها من أولها إلى آخرها، من أقوى رجل فيها إلى أضعف إنسان فيها، يشاهد بصمت عجيب، بصمت مدون يخوف ذلك الذي فيه خشية من الله سبحانه وتعالى. وإذا أردت يا أخي ويا أختي أن ترى واقعا مختلفا في العاجل القريب أو في الآجل البعيد، قريبا كان أو بعيدا، إذا أردت يوما ما أن يقف إنسان مثلي على منبر كهذا المنبر فيقول كلاما مختلفا ويسرد قصة مختلفة ويحدث الناس عن واقع مختلف لا يكون فيها دم المسلم بهذا الرخص ولا يكون فيها مروءة المسلم بهذا الرخص، إذا أردت أن ترى شيئا مختلفا فعليك اليوم في لحظتنا هذه وساعتنا هذه أن تنوي في نفسك تغييرا. هذا التغيير لا يستطيع أحد أن يعرفه ولا أن يراه ولا أن يحاسبك عليه، لكن هي نية في القلب تحدثها ثم تسير في طريق لعل هذه الطريق تكون مختلفة عن الطريق الذي سرت عليها طيلة هذه المدة. When you go to Sirat ibn Ishaq or ibn Hisham and you look at the 6th year of his prophecy, alayhi salatu wasalam, what you will find is that there was all of this persecution, just ongoing oppression, persecution, torture. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was being physically, not just psychologically and reputationally ruined. He was also being physically mistreated, alayhi salatu wasalam. And all of the Sahaba the same. People were being laid on beds of coal until their backs burned. People were being smoked within their houses until they got sick. People were being murdered. But then there are two people who accepted Islam. And every book of Seerah talks about the acceptance of Islam of these two people as if it's its own chapter. As if it's its own thing, its own incident. Many people were accepting Islam. A lot of people did. We didn't have a chapter for each of them. But there were two individuals, when they accepted Islam, it was a chapter. And the whole morale changes, and the way the story was told is changed. You see, when Hamza accepted Islam, they celebrated. People felt better. Ibn Umar said, we walked with our heads held high because Hamza was now Muslim. I could always refer to him if I got scared. I had someone to protect me. When Umar accepted Islam, Ibn Mas'ud would say, we were humiliated until Umar accepted Islam. And then we prayed in front of the Kaaba and feared no one but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can you be a human being who has that weight in your community, not your physical weight, but your actual weight, to have weight in your community, to act, to bring change, to be a person who once they actually do something, they carry the weight of hundreds of people with their work. Amr ibn al-As, when he tried to conquer Egypt, at a certain point he ran into a problem. He couldn't advance anymore. A couple of months went by, he couldn't advance. You find this story in Kanz al-Ummal and in other narrations as well, in other books as well. He couldn't advance, so he sent to Umar al-Khattab saying, I need another 8,000 troops. I can't move. So he sent him, radiallahu anhu, 4,000 troops, which is half. And Amr al-As is standing, seeing the troops come, and he's seeing half of what he was hoping for. He's very upset. But then the kitab of Umar reached him, like the book, the actual letter. And it said the following, قال إني أمددتك ب4,000 رجل على كل 1,000 رجل منهم مقام 1,000 فإذا سئلت بما أمدك عمر تقول أمدني ب8,000 وإن قلت ب4 قطعت عنقك. I sent you 4,000 people. Leading each 1,000 is a man who is worthy of 1,000. He sent to him Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, and Miqdad ibn al-Aswad, and Ubadah ibn al-Samit, and Maslam ibn Makhlad, radiallahu anhum ajma'een. He told him, I sent you 8,000. If you tell me ever that I sent you 4,000, I'll off with your head. So Umar had to be quiet, and like, fine. At the end of the conquest of Egypt, he would send back saying, قالوا لو أرسلت لي الأربعة فقط لكفى. If you just sent me the 4, that would be enough. You could have kept the 4,000 with you. Because sometimes a person can be, a person can have that impact, that influence, that effect. It doesn't come from how big you are, how strong physically you are, how much money you have. It comes from something different. It comes from something different. When the Prophet ﷺ said, لو وزن إيمان أمتي في كفة وإيمان أبي بكر لرجح بها إيمان أبي بكر. When he talked about the Iman of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu being heavier than the Imam of the Ummah. And they asked, well, what is it? We don't see him like doing Qiyam al-Layl all night and fasting all day. قال لي شيء وقر في صدره. Something in his heart. Something about him. Something about the quality of his belief, the intention he made, the love he had for the Ummah, and the willingness to dedicate himself to that cause is what made the difference. So the potential for change is there. We can do it. The question that I have to ask you and myself is, will we do it? Are you willing to change? Or are we going to go back to our same lifestyles, hoping that somehow, outside of ourselves, change will occur? That, my brothers and sisters, is an umniyah. That's a wishful thinking. For you to say, no, I'm going to go back after this khutbah and live the exact same life I've been living this whole time, and then somehow change is going to occur. It doesn't work that way. If you understand Islam, you know that doesn't work that way. There has to be something else that changes. Now, if we didn't have the potential, I would tell it to you straight, that there's something missing, but there's nothing, absolutely nothing missing, aside from the willingness of people to change. And I think this is a good intention to begin with before we enter Ramadan. I hope that was of benefit to you. واعلموا أن الله أمرنا بأمر عظيم فقال إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن الأربعة الخلفاء السادة الحنفاء أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي وارض اللهم عن أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وعن آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعن صحابته الغر الميامين وعن التابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات اللهم فرج هموم المهمومين ونفس كروب المكروبين وارفع الغم عن المغمومين وارفع الظلم عن المظلومين اللهم فرج هموم إخواننا المستضعفين في غزة فلسطين وفي السودان وفي غيرها من بلاد الأرض يا رب العالمين اللهم أطعم جائعهم واكس عاريهم اللهم يا رب اشف مرضاهم وعاف مبتلاهم وتقبل شهداءهم أجمعين يا حي يا قيوم اللهم رد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين اللهم ارزقنا أجمعين فيه صلاة قبل الممات اللهم ردنا أجمعين إليك وإلى دينك ردا جميلا وتب علينا اللهم من جميع ذنوبنا توبة نصوحا طهرنا بها قلبا وجسدا وروحا وما ذلك عليك اللهم بعزيز ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون أقم الصلاة
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
دائما أبدا لا إله إلا الله استووا اعتدلوا استقيموا لا تختلفوا استقيموا ولا تختلفوا حاذوا من المناكب سدوا الخلل تدعوا فرجا بينكم سووا الصف تسوية الصف من إقام الصلاة هتموا الأول فالأولين وبيد إخوانكم shoulder to shoulder ankle to ankle you make sure your lines are straight there are no gaps silence your phones استووا يرحمكم الله الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين يا أيها النبي حرض المؤمنين على القتال إن يكن منكم 20 صابرون يغلبوا 200 وإن يكن منكم 100 صابرة يغلبوا 1000 من الذين كفروا بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون الآن خفف الله عنكم وعلم أن فيكم ضعفا فإن يكن منكم 100 صابرة يغلبوا 200 وإن يكن منكم 1000 يغلبوا 2000 بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.